Chapter 3 of Midnight. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. Midnight by Octavius Roy Cohen. Chapter 3. Find the Woman. The thing was incomprehensible, yet true. Not a single article of feminine apparel was contained in the suitcase. Not only that, but every garment therein which bore an identification mark was the property of Roland Warren, the man whose body leered at them from the floor of the taxicab. The two detectives again inspected the suitcase. An extra suit had been neatly folded. The pockets bore the label of a leading tailor and the name Roland R. Warren. The tailor-made shirts and underwear bore the maker's name and Warren's initials. The handkerchiefs were Warren's. Even those articles which were without name or initials contained the same laundry mark as those which they knew belonged to the dead man. Carroll's face showed keen interest. This newest development had rather startled him, and made an almost irresistible appeal to his love for the bizarre in crime. The very fact that the circumstances smacked of the impossible intrigued him. He narrowed his eyes and gazed again upon the form of the dead man. Finally he nudged Leverage and designated three initials on the end of the suitcase. R.R.W. Roland R. Warren, Leverage grunted. It's his all right, Carroll. But just the same, there ain't no such animal. Carroll turned to the dazed Walters. "Understand what we've just discovered, son?" he inquired mildly. Spike's teeth were chattering with cold. "I don't hardly understand none of it, sir. 'Cordin' to what I make out, that suitcase belongs to the body and not to the woman." "Right. Now what I want to know is, how that could be." Spike shook his head dazedly. "Lordy, Mr. Carroll, I couldn't be knowin' that." "You're sure the woman got into your cab alone?" "Absolutely, sir. She came through the waiting room alone, carrying that very same suitcase." "You're positive it was that suitcase?" "Yes, sir. That is, as positive as I can be. You see, I was on the lookout for a fare, but wasn't expecting one, on account of the fact that this here train was an accommodation, and folks that usually come in on it take street cars and not a taxi. Well, the minute I seen a good-lookin', well-dressed woman comin' out the door, I sort of noticed. It surprised me first off, because I asked myself what she was doing on that train." "You thought it was peculiar?" "Not peculiar, exactly, but sort of interesting." "I see. Go ahead." "Well, she was carrying that suitcase, and she seemed in a sort of a hurry. She walked straight out of the door and toward the curb, and—" "Did she appear to be expecting someone?" "No, sir. I noticed that particularly. Sort of thought a fine lady like her would have someone to meet her, which is how I happened to notice that she didn't seem to expect nobody. She come right to the curb and called me. I was parked along the curb on the right side of Atlantic Avenue, headin' north that is, and I rolled up. She handed me the suitcase and told me to drive her to number 981 East End Avenue. I stuck the suitcase right where you got it from just now, and while I ain't sayin' nothin' about what happened back yonder in the cab, Mr. Carroll, I'll bet anything in the world that that there suitcase is the same one she carried through the waitin' room and handed to me." Peculiar. You drove straight out here, Walters?" "Straight as a bee line, sir. Frozen stiff I was, drivin' right into the wind eastward along East End Avenue, and I had to raise the windshield a bit because there was ice on it, and I couldn't see nothin', and my headlights ain't any too strong." "You didn't stop anywhere?" "No, sir. Wait a minute. "I did." "Where?" "At the R. L. & T. railroad crossing, sir. I didn't see nor hear no train there, and almost run into it. It was a freight, and travelin' kinder slow. I seen the lights of the caboose and stopped the car right close to the track. I wasn't stopped more'n 15 or 20 seconds, and just as soon as the train got by, I went on." "But you did stand still for a few seconds." "Yes, sir." "If any one had got into or out of the cab right there, would you have heard them?" "I don't know that I would. I was frozen stiff, like I told you, sir, and I wasn't thinking of nothing like that. Besides, the train was making a noise, and me not having my thoughts on nothing but how cold I was and how far I had to drive, I most probably wouldn't have noticed, although I might have." "Looks to me," chimed in Leverage, "as if that's where the shift must have taken place, though it beats me." Carroll lighted a cigarette. Of the three men he was the only one who seemed impervious to the cold. Leverage and the taxi driver were both shivering as if with the ague. Carroll, an enormous overcoat snuggled about his neck, his hands thrust deep into his pockets, his boyish face set with interest, seemed perfectly comfortable. As a matter of fact, the unique circumstances surrounding the murder had so interested him that he had quite forgotten the weather. "Obviously," he said to Leverage, "it's up to us to find out whether the people at this house here expected a visitor." "You said it, David, but I haven't any doubt it was a plant, a fake address." "I think so, too." "Wait here." The chief started for the dark little house. "I'll ask him." 3 minutes later Leverage was back. "Said nothing doing," he imparted laconically. "No one expected, no one away who would be coming back, and then wanted to know who in thunder I was. They almost dropped dead when I told 'em. No question about it, that address was a stall. This dame had something up her sleeve, and took care to see that your taxi man was given a long drive so she'd have plenty of time to croak Warren." "Then you think she met him by arrangement, Chief?" "Looks so to me. Only thing is, where did he get in?" "That's what is going to interest us for some time to come, I'm afraid. And now suppose we go back to town? I'll drive my car. I'll keep behind you and Walters here. You ride together in his cab." Walters clambered to his seat and succeeded, after much effort, in starting his frozen motor. Leverage bulked beside him on the suitcase of the dead man. The taxi swung cityward, and immediately behind trailed Carroll in his cozy coupe. As Carroll drove mechanically through the night, he gave himself over to a siege of intensive thought. The case seemed fraught with unusual interest. Already it had developed an overplus of extraordinary circumstances, and Carroll had a decided premonition that the road of investigation ahead promised many surprises. There was every reason why it should. The social prominence of the dead man, the mysterious disappearance of the handsomely dressed woman, all the facts of the case pointed to an involved trail. If it were true that the woman had entered the taxicab alone, that the man had come in later, and that the murder had been committed by the woman in the cab before reaching the railroad crossing, the thing must undoubtedly have been prearranged to the smallest fractional detail. That being the premise, it was only a logical conclusion that persons other than the woman and the dead man were involved. Interesting. Decidedly so. But there was nothing to work on. Even the suitcase clue had vanished into thin air, so far as its value to the police was concerned. That suitcase bothered Carroll. He believed Spike's story, and was convinced that the suitcase which they had examined out on East End Avenue was the one which the woman had carried from the